Thank you for listening to KSQD 90.7 FM, also on 89.7 and 89.5. We're going to be the squid all over the Monterey Bay pretty soon. Welcome to The Cutting Edge. I'm Tim Fitzmaurice. Today on The Cutting Edge, we're going to have a conversation with Manel Camps, the Provost of Crown College at UC Santa Cruz since 2014, and now the Director for the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurial Development, CIED. We'll find out what that means. Hi, Manel.
Hi, Tim.
How are you today?
Good. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for agreeing to talk with us. My basic question is, how has the powerful experience of growing up in the poorest neighborhood of Barcelona, how's that helped you and to shape education here for students, shape your own education, I suppose, and to shape education for students at the University of California, Santa Cruz?
Yeah. I would say that it has definitely shaped the way I approach things. It really makes you value what you have. I grew up without heating, without running water, with a shower that was out in the balcony.
I see.
So everything that happened afterwards seems luxury to me. So essentially, it makes you be a very positive person, right? So everything, your expectation is very low, so everything is good. Everything is better.
If the good things come,
yes,
you really feel them. Yeah.
You feel them, yeah. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I was acutely aware of the difference between what you can achieve on your own, based on your own effort, and what you really need additional support that you alone cannot do, right? Your world is much narrower when you grow up in that kind of an environment than if you grow up in an affluent environment. And I kind of knew that because I attended a school that was actually between the two neighborhoods. So one that was middle class and one that was poor. And there was a mixture of students there. So I could tell that the students from the other side of a street called La Ronda, they had a much better idea of where they were going, right?
Yeah, I see.
They also were socially much more active, right? So they had their parties, they invited their friends. I couldn't invite anyone to my home. So your world is narrower, and you're much more aware of what you actually need. And for me, the university was really the ticket out of that environment, and that's why education is so close to my heart, and why I feel that education is more than just intellectual interest. It's really about improving your quality of life and about contributing to society. I have a broader view of what education is about, and that ties in very well with my role as Provost of Crown, because at Crown, essentially, I was given it's like a blank slate. You can design a program however you want it, because you're not tied to a specific discipline. So essentially, over the years, I found that at Crown, a good niche to try to fill was supporting our students' abilities to transferable skills, right? Because by transferable skills, I mean things like being able to program, being able to communicate, being able to produce videos or podcasts. So these are things that you find on campus, but they tend to be part of specific measures. I think that everybody should know these things. So we're creating classes open to all students that are interested in learning these skills. The other thing, going back to why I think that my conception of education as being really part of a broader context, and we and other colleges also are developing programs where students work with the community, right? So apply their knowledge to specific problems in the community. And that pedagogically, that's 1,000 times better than learning things in the classroom, but also gives you a bridge to a professional career, right? So it gives you that experience, that letter of recommendation that really sets the stage for the next step. once you graduate. But the thing is, we're undergoing a massive disruption in the job market. So the more flexible you are, the better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't know what jobs you're going to have 20 years from now.
No.
And the other thing is also, even within a certain career track, the more skills you have, the more likely you are to go up into management and on higher levels within your organization.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I think that transferable skills are good all around. And I think that at some point we're going to have to rethink how we deliver university education.
Mm-hmm. What are we driving at here?
So what I'm driving at is that I think that we should spend 2 years focusing on those basic skills. Like everybody should know how to program. Everybody should know.
Everybody.
Yes, everybody should. Yeah, everybody should know how to use a spreadsheet. Everybody should have good writing skills. Everybody should know math. I'm sorry, but this is. And then once you have that foundation, then the last 2 years, then you go into more disciplinary. Mm-hmm. Well, I've seen this in my field, right? So I'm a microbiologist. So 50 years ago, a microbiologist would have, in terms of concepts and techniques, would have had nothing to do with a botanist. I mean, pretty much nothing, right? They were two separate fields. Nowadays, I would say maybe 80% of what we do is the same that a botanist would do, because we all work on genes and biochemistry. Essentially, we've deciphered the basic pieces that are used for life to function, and then you just apply them to different organisms. But we all speak the same language. We use the same techniques. I think that we're going to have to reconsider the basic skills that everybody is going to be using, have everybody learn them, and then see what you actually need to specialize in. But you see what I'm getting at, that we should rethink really what are the skills that our students need, not what content our students need, because the content these days is in Wikipedia. I mean, studying content these days is not very efficient. It really should be about skills. It should be about analysis.
And so the future, it depends upon skills like that, and not necessarily knowing a body of knowledge.
No.
Because the body of knowledge is going to change, and it's also available in other ways.
Exactly.
Right.
Especially it's available in other ways. And also, it used to be that there was an authority that generated that, and that was the only knowledge available. Now that's many different ways of looking at things. So you can it's hard to even know what the actual knowledge is, especially in the liberal arts. There's a much more diversity of opinions than we had before, I think, because of social media and the internet and all that. It has empowered many people to many different voices.
You're listening to KSQD 90.7 FM and ksqd.org, and we're talking with Manel Camps, professor of microbiology and the provost of Crown College. And we're talking about your science and the fact that you're a researcher in microbiology. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can tell us more about that.
Tim, you mentioned how my background shaped me. So one thing that I used to do is I used to think that learning was about textbooks. Right? It was about going through a textbook, understanding the material, but who wrote that textbook is irrelevant. Right? It's about the material. And then I was very privileged to be able to go to Stanford for my PhD. And I actually had a lecture by the person who started the molecular biology revolution. And that person is Arthur Kornberg. And what he did was he studied how little pieces of DNA in a bacterium called E. coli were copied. He actually had a hard time explaining why this would have an impact on our understanding of human disease, right? Because I mean, this bacterium does cause disease, but there are diseases have much bigger impact and much more direct impact on human health. So why spend time looking at this little circle of DNA and how it's copied? But essentially, by figuring out this, he started the molecular biology revolution because it allowed us to put any gene that you want into a circle and copy it and amplify it and characterize it, right? So, so that stayed with me, and I'm still studying that little circle of DNA. And pretty much very few people were looking at this. Everyone is using it because everybody assumed that if this was found in the 50s, we must know everything about it. And we know so little. I mean, we just published, for example, I'll give you an example. So these circles are copied in many copies. And people assume that then when the cell divides, it will be no problem to get one copy into each cell. If you have 100 copies, random chance is that you don't have to do anything to get at least one copy into a daughter cell. So we and two other groups actually showed that that's not the case at all. That actually, if you look at the number of cells that don't get a circle when they divide, it's quite high. It's about 3%. It's much, much higher than you would expect if this was random, right? So there has to be a mechanism that controls this segregation. We even found where in the circle that mechanism is being controlled, but we still don't know what the mechanism is. There's many things that we still don't understand about then how plasmids, for example, how plasmids are maintained. So these circles of DNA, they are supposed to impose a cost on the cell, but we don't understand what that cost is, right? So essentially, there's many questions that still haven't been answered. But this little story tells you how important basic science is, right? So if we had only invested in solving individual diseases as opposed to studying how a circle of DNA is copied, we wouldn't have had the molecular biology revolution, right? We would have, our ability to study disease in general would have been much diminished.
So science isn't mere problem solving.
Yes, and now you're touching in something that's very, very important. Essentially, when we ask for funding, we come up with a 5-year plan and we say what we're going to do, right? But when you actually start implementing the plan, you may find that what you thought you were going to find is not what you found, and then you really have to follow the trail. And I think that science is really about reconciling the observations with the models. So science is about building models that explain reality. And I think in a very deep way, this is what makes humans different than animals. I mean, I think that we're the only ones that actually have a general interpretation of the world around us that we can articulate. I mean, I'm sure that other animals have a map of their world, but we are the ones who can actually explain to other people the model, right? And science is about building a model, and it's about finding if the observations match. If they don't, then you have to come up with another model, and that's where creativity is. And then those models can then be applied more generally, right? So once Arthur Kornberg figured out how that little piece of DNA was copied, then we looked at how does the big piece of DNA, which is the chromosome, being copied, right? How is it being copied? And how do viruses replicate? So that he created a model we can apply to many different situations.
It's just amazing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
What science can do.
Mm-hmm.
And how you have to, in a sense, keep science from being purely functional.
Yeah, there's something very creative about science.
I heard that we had had more research publications than any other University of California, or maybe even because we have we have like observatory, we have marine lab, we have earthquakes and whatever we have. We have all these different things that we look at. So it's always been a surprisingly productive place for research at the University of California. And of course, the microbiology. Even
though I would argue that the number of publications is not the best metric.
It's not the reflection of success.
But if you think about like seminal papers or areas that were founded at UCSC or that were UCSC is a reference in the world, that's very impressive.
It
right?
is. It's surprising.
Yeah, I mean, coastal science, UCSC had a huge impact. Genomics, astronomy, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was here when the human genome was being developed, and local people were very involved in doing the. I think it was doing mostly the computer work on that. The local gentleman did.
Yeah, and we're still very much at the cutting edge. Yeah, I teach an anatomy. I used to teach an anatomy class, and I used to teach a module on evolution, and updating the students on the paleogenomics revolution was totally exhilarating. I mean, all of a sudden, thanks to genomics, our understanding of human evolution has been completely transformed. I like to give our students that iconic image of the chimpanzee gradually becoming a human, and I ask them to tell me 5 things that are wrong with that picture. There's more than 5, but 5. And this is just to give you an idea of how genomics has transformed our understanding of evolution.
Are you going to tell me what the 5 things are?
Okay, so
give me a clue. Give me a clue. It's really interesting.
Okay, so one thing is that it's not linear at all. It's really a bunch of branches. It's like a bush with a bunch of branches. But to make things even more interesting, there's actually interbreeding between them. And we know that thanks to genetics. So we know that our genome, well, the genome of people who are of European and Asian ancestry have Neanderthal DNA in them, Denisovan DNA. And there's a bunch of what's called ghost species that we've inferred based on genetics, but we haven't discovered the
traces of them,
the sources of them, right? So we know that this is called introgression, so that there's been introgression into Homo sapiens genome from another species, but we don't know what that species is yet. So it's not linear at all. The other thing is getting upright was pretty sharp. So it's not a gradual process because you're either walking on your knuckles or on your fours or upright, but you can't be in between.
There's no in between.
There's no in between. So.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. No, there's quite a few more. Losing hair was also pretty fast, a pretty quick process.
That was a quick process too.
Yeah, and we know that looking at the genomes of lice, because for lice to move from your head to your pubic area, you have to have hair in between.
Oh, I see.
The moment you don't, those lice evolve separately.
I see.
So using a molecular clock, we were able to establish that we lost our hair 3.2 million years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
This is really enlightening.
Yeah.
Thanks to the lice, I suppose. Yeah. I think I want to ask right now, I mean, we're already at the second half of our program, believe it or not, and I want to ask about the core course, the thing that we work with, and the fact that do you like being a provost?
I love it, yeah.
What's so good about it?
I like several things. So I like the fact that it's a community that you can really bond with and relate to, right? So the faculty I work with, I get to know well. I need to work with them one-on-one. The alumni, get to know them and work with them. The staff, of course, and the students too. At the college, I feel that that I can get to know at least some of the students personally, and I certainly don't think of them in terms of metrics or numbers. I think of them in terms of real people that are gonna benefit from the act personally of the programs that I'm developing, and I can see the impact. So the other thing that I really like is the immediacy, right? So you can recruit a new instructor, design a new class, and within 6 months, the students benefit from that. You can launch the class, and the students are taking it.
So you can be responsive to things you're hearing in the community.
Exactly.
Or seeing in the community at a certain moment.
Well, and the other thing that I love, and it goes back to this idea that education is not something that's just in the abstract, that it has connections with professional development, with building bridges with the community. It's not in a vacuum. And the colleges are very well positioned to bridge that gap between the academia and the community. Right? Because, first of all, most of our lecturers are local, and they come with their own acquaintances, their own connections, their own networks. And we can develop programs with local institutions, right? So, and several colleges have that. This is not unique to Crown, but Crown has developed a program. Well, one of our lecturers, thanks to her background and to her local connections, was able to develop a program in collaboration with an organization called Get Virtual that takes groups of students who have taken some entrepreneurship classes and work with local businesses to improve on their business plans and to improve on their visibility. So
this is of special interest to you, the entrepreneurial aspect
Yes.
of education as it's taking place right now.
Yes.
How do you explain that?
Because, so for me, education is about empowerment, right? It's about essentially giving our students the tools and the confidence to solve problems in real life, because essentially that's what's going to make them successful professionally, right? Eventually, someone will hire you to get something solved and done, right? So for me, entrepreneurship is the ultimate example of that. Is seeing a need, a gap in our needs, trying to fill it, and essentially having the leadership ability to bring all the complex elements that go into building an organization and getting it done. So if you can pull that off, you can pull anything off, right?
Does it change the way we educate?
It's complicated because there's ideology behind this. So I won't lie and pretend that this is an ideological vacuum. When entrepreneurship is presented as just having an idea, having the leadership skills, and pulling it off, we're missing the fact that you need a network, and you need a lot of social capital to pull it off. Mm-hmm. So here you see the socioeconomic disadvantages magnified. By pretending that everybody can reach this dream in a vacuum, we're masking the fact that there's a very substantial difference in terms of opportunities depending on where you're coming from. And that's why I think that programs like ours is so important, because the university can be a way to fill in this gap, right?
I see. Yeah. In a sense, what you're saying is music to my ears, because I fret about telling people their work has to be entrepreneurial when not everyone has the same foundation to actually build something entrepreneurial, and in a sense feels like a failure if they don't do it. And you don't want to. You want to be sure to look at all the different aspects of an economy that requires so many other different kinds of skills and foundations in order to be successful.
Yes, and we also have to be careful, because if the only way to make a good salary is to succeed as an entrepreneur, and there are these differences, in a way we're excluding large parts of our society from economic success. I mean, I
think it does change the nature of work, and so we need to look at it very carefully. But I don't think you can resist. It's like, what I like about our course is that we look at technology, and we're not deniers of technology. No. We're not going to say don't go there about social media, or don't go there about something that everybody's fretting about. And entrepreneurial thinking is also something people are fretting about. Yes.
And another reason that this is coming back so strongly, this push for entrepreneurship, is that it ties in with this trend of considering that the fulfillment of your work should be part of the equation. And here we're seeing a substantial shift, right? So we moved from the industrial economy, where most jobs were just following directions and spending 8 hours in your job, to a much more dynamic situation that has been facilitated by the digital revolution, where you have a lot more initiative and a lot more flexibility.
Right.
So increasingly, people are looking for satisfaction in their jobs and for flexibility.
Right.
And that ties in with the idea that your work is about solving problems, not about following orders from your supervisor blindly, right?
Yeah, I think people are looking to their own happiness.
Yes.
Which I think is a pretty appropriate thing to do when you decide what your career is going to be, what your work is going to be, is to develop that notion of happiness. And essentially, you're saying the university can support this in a much more diverse way.
Yes.
In a much more multifaceted way, so that we're not just saying, you can get rich quick if you just have a good idea and then get a lot of people to invest in it, or something like that. You really can think about all the implications of the things that you're doing.
Well, and provide you all the tools that you need.
Like
right?
What tools are you suggesting? Because I see the word writing in here, and I see the kinds of tools that we do try to provide.
Okay, so there's two types of tools. So one type of tool is transferable skills, right? So you have to communicate, you have to be able to keep projects, to organize, and what's called effecting on projects. So you have to deliver on the projects and be organized enough to do that. You have to recruit and keep your team together, and you have to be able to communicate. That's key, right? So essentially, at some point, you're going to have to fundraise. You're going to have to convince someone that your idea is worth funding. That requires major communication skills, right? So that's one aspect. But even with all that, you also need people to guide you on the different steps that you have to go through, and you have to have a network of people who can point you in the right direction. So you really need someone in the field to mentor you. It's not easy. It's not just having an idea and being talented.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the university, if it's going to be functional in a modern economy, in a modern world with diverse people, and has to be able to supply those kinds of skills that are going to be adequate to make yourself happy.
But the challenge, Tim, is that they have to provide the skills that will allow you to succeed 20 years from now. And we don't know what those jobs are going to be, right?
No, we don't.
I mean, if you think about this, I trained in the 80s, and I'm here in 2023 using the skills I learned back then.
Right.
And never in a million years would I have imagined I would be provost of a college. So.
Right. Thank you, Manel. Thank you for listening to KSQD 90.7 FM and for listening to us online at ksqd.org. This program will be available for the next 2 weeks online. Our guest has been Manel Camps, a professor of microbiology and the provost of Crown College. It's really nice talking to you.
Thank you, Tim.